This is John Howell Essential Cuts, your daily rundown of the best from today's show on 890 WLS.
Very serious story here, tragic story. It's been a couple weeks now, but officials now have released the names of 388 people who are missing that they hope will spur those people to report that, in fact, they're safe. But earlier this week, the FBI said it was working on a list of about 1,100 people who are still missing, and they're trying to find them. A lot of those are younger people. Let's start there with Alex Stone in Los Angeles on behalf of ABC. He's been covering this story since the fire. Alex, what's the latest?
Yeah, so on the list, the reason why they're doing it is they've kind of gotten to a point where the FBI is saying, we don't know where these people are. They cannot find these people. They've got 1,100 names on there, but many of those names are single names. So, it's Bill. Well, who is Bill and how are they going to find Bill? So what they've done is they've put out the 388 that they're calling verified, that seem to be real people, that have a first and a last name, that have a point of contact, and that they can't find these people, that they've got their cell phone, they've got their address, they've got whatever, and they can't find them. And the idea being, now let's put it out there, ask people to look at the list. If you know anybody who lives on Maui or have family members or you live on Maui, look at the list and let the FBI know if you see somebody on there who you know is alive and that they're doing well. And the chief's saying this.
We are asking, if you're on this list, please contact the FBI number provided. If you know the person is safe, please contact the FBI number provided or email mpd@unaccounted@mpd.net.
They want to bring that number down. The cadaver dogs are still in searching today. The number has been hovering around 115 confirmed dead most of this week for the last couple of days. They don't know where everybody else is. They're hoping that the total number putting out there, 388, the 388 people are going to contact them and say, hey, my name was on the list, I'm good. And that the number's not going to go up anymore. But they believe it will be going up, maybe substantially, but they're looking for help now and putting that list out.
Are they making their way through the multi-story buildings? The last time we talked, they had just started on that project.
That's what they're doing today. They think it's going to be a week, 2 weeks to get that done, and the commercial buildings. There's been this growing conspiracy, kind of fueled by Twitter and people who are quote-unquote investigative reporters who have gone to Maui and claim to be doing a lot on Maui, where are the children? And there's no proof that there's any kind of cover-up of the children who died, but you go on social media and certain more conspiracy-type social media shows that are done, and it's all about that there's some kind of conspiracy to cover up the kids who were lost in there. They have now positively identified the first child found dead, a 7-year-old boy, Tony Takafua. And the county is saying they know there are children. They've got to match them to DNA. They're not finding full bodies, that they only know they're children based on the size of the remains, and that it's going to take time, that there is not a cover-up in there. But you still have those who are, going on social media and going to every news conference yelling, where are the children, and that you're lying about the children.
Oh, good grief.
And that the county is saying, this is a major disaster. Yes, most of those names that have come out, who they've identified, they've been elderly. They know that there are children. This is the first, and there will be more.
Is any of the conspiracy podcasters or internet people yelling out Hillary Clinton or naming a pizza parlor in D.C.?
I'm sure that's being tossed in there as well. I mean, Steve Bannon and others have been having people on talking about a lot of this, that some kind of cover-up, but there's no proof that they're trying to hide what they've got. They just say that when they're dealing essentially with cremated remains and dogs that are getting hits on small bone and teeth and on dust, essentially, that this is not going to go quick, that there's no cover-up. They know they have children. They don't know who they are.
So they're at 388, you said, right? That's those
388
posted,
verified,
posted.
yeah.
And so, but still, as the FBI had said recently, upwards of near 1,000, maybe 1,100 that they're trying to get conclusive.
Yeah, so they've got the issue that they've got is the county did not start creating a list on the island that was official. So what the FBI is doing is taking all of these grassroots groups that started their own lists and trying to pull them together and then begin working from those. So there was no official way of removing people from lists. Some people were on 3 different lists. Some people never probably existed. Somebody said, well, I saw a guy on a bicycle go riding down Front Street, and he may not have made it, and then they get put on the list. Most of the names on the list are single names, Frank, John, Sam.
It's impossible.
So now they got to figure out, does that person even exist? So these are the 388 that they believe were or are real people, and they're trying to figure out where they are.
I bet you a year from now we won't know conclusively the number of people that were incinerated that
we
night.
are not going to know. Yeah, the chief put it this way.
I can't guarantee, nor can anyone say that we got everybody. We're going to do our darndest to get it right and make every effort to do that.
He likened it to 9/11. He said, look, there are a lot of people in 9/11 who we know went to work that day and they were never found and they're presumed dead. He said in the end of this, he believes that there are going to be a lot of people who disappeared that day, but they never find their remains. They were completely consumed by the fire, and we'll just never know. We'll presume they're dead, but we'll never know.
You know this as well, but there were some guys who were presumed dead on 9/11 who turned up later that just decided to use that as an excuse to go off the grid.
Yeah, and that may go on here as well. People who say, well, this is my chance, and they bail out of there, but there are going to be names that we'll probably never really know.
Alex, thanks so much for your update. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Chicago Fire in Los Angeles this Sunday night, 9 o'clock pre-match, kickoff at 9:30 p.m. on air on WLS. You can watch it on Apple TV with MLS Season Pass. Marcelo Balboa, a former U.S. national team defender and member of the Soccer Hall of Fame, Spanish-language match analyst for MLS Season Pass, went into broadcasting after retired as a player, ABC, ESPN, Univision as a player. He enjoyed a career both with the U.S. national team and in the MLS. Named Soccer Athlete of the Year in 92 and then again in 94. He became the first American player to break the 100-cap barrier in 1995, and it's great to have him here on WLS. He's now a match analyst for MLS Season Pass. Thank you for joining us, Marcelo. I understand you were born here in Chicago, and your family has a history of playing in the soccer leagues here in town. Please elaborate.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I was born in Chicago in Cook County Hospital. My dad in 1965, I believe it was a member of the Chicago Mustangs with a former national team coach, Bob Gansler. And that's where he played. That's where we were born. After that, I think in 69, we went back to Argentina. 68, 69, we went back. But we were both, me and my brother were born, and my dad played in Chicago.
I remember the Chicago Sting years ago when I first got to town. Yeah.
The good old days. It went basically from the Chicago Mustangs, then it went to the Chicago Sting, and then Chicago Fire, and a little bit of the history of that.
Well, Chicago Fire takes on the LA Galaxy Sunday, 9 o'clock, kickoff at 9:30 p.m. On air both here on WLS, and you can watch it on Apple TV with MLS Season Pass. For those of us who have to get to our bookies before the match, who do you like?
Well, it's interesting because I think when you look during the offseason, or not the offseason, the midseason form, when you're looking at LA Galaxy, when they went out and bought Facundes, they traded him from Austin, Michael Barrios from Chicago or from Colorado, Billy Sharp, which we all know is bringing a lot of pedigree at his age, playing at Sheffield Wednesday, Cirillo from Dallas. So I don't know if there's a favorite right now, but I think if you look at who reinforced their team better right now, you'd have to go with the LA Galaxy, plus they're playing at home. I would give the advantage a little bit to LA, but we also know how good Chicago is on the road. We know how well they play the low block and how they defend and hit you on counterattack. So it's a very good matchup, but I give LA just a little bit of a hint of favor because of the fact that they're playing at home.
Who is a bigger superstar in his sport, Messi in soccer or Michael Jordan at his prime in the NBA?
Oof, I had an easy answer because I thought you were going to throw at me LeBron James. But, I would say right now in our sport, globally, both athletes, because I'm a Michael Jordan fan, and I would think they both hit worldwide. I think the difference is the social media and what it's done for the modern athlete compared to when we played back in the old days where there was nothing. I would say, unfortunately, I think Messi has made a bigger impact in global soccer because of the fact that soccer is a global sport compared to basketball. I would say Messi's probably made a bigger impact right now.
And finally, I asked this question of all the soccer analysts that I have on the program. Do you think Ted Lasso is worth watching?
I do think it's worth watching. I enjoy it. I think it's unfortunately has given people a funny perception, and I think Jesse Marsh, when he went to Leeds United, kind of joked around a little bit about people, looking at American coaches at a different way. But I think it's a great show. It's on Apple TV, and yes, I watch it and I recommend it.
Marcelo Balboa, thank you so much for your time. I hope the Fire beat L.A., contrary to what you say this weekend. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you guys watching it on Apple TV.
Football is life.
Right, you say that football is life, right?
Football is life.
Yeah, well, then your defense is death.
Ooh, Chicago Fire taking on L.A. Sunday, pre-match 9 p.m. Kickoff on the pitch at 9:30. On here, on air WDLS on the big stick, 89. You can also watch it on Apple TV with MLS Season Pass.
This is John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Always great to talk to Charles Lipson, professor of political science, emeritus at the University of Chicago, and a John Lee Hooker fan and blues aficionado. Professor, welcome back, sir. How are you?
Man, I not only love John Lee Hooker, he was born about 10 miles from me. Friends of mine managed to get a plaque put up near where he was born honoring him. And, of course, he got his start really about 20 miles away from me in Clarksdale, Mississippi. But he is not a Chicago blues man. He is a Detroit. He went up to Detroit. But there is an evil sound to him, man, that the only person who even comes close is Howlin' Wolf.
Yeah, he has a great style. He
really does. He really does. Have you heard him do that duet with Bonnie Raitt? I'm in the mood.
Yes, I have. I'm in the mood. That's the name of his album from '51 that put him on the map, and then he redid that with Bonnie Raitt, who's no slouch herself.
Oh, absolutely. I once saw Bonnie just after I was in graduate school at Harvard. She just dropped out of Radcliffe, and I guess I saw her play in front of about 6 or 8 people.
Did you ever go to the Jonathan Swift's in Harvard Square, that place, Jonathan Swift's?
I don't remember going there. I remember the Blue Parrot. I remember a lot of things. One of my favorite things there was that Harvard had this huge long period, John, like 6 weeks, where there were no classes. You could prepare for exam and then take exams. So there was a movie theater that started a Humphrey Bogart festival.
Yeah, I know the theater.
Yeah, the Brattle. And I went there once when they played Casablanca, and the entire audience stood when they sang the Marseillaise. And then at the end of it, somebody popped a champagne.
Yeah, perfect.
It was just so much fun.
Yeah. Do you remember?
We've got other things to talk about.
I know. I'm going to get that. I just want to mention a couple other places. You used to go to Inman Square, I'm sure, right? There were a couple of great clubs there. And then Ryle's Tavern. Do you remember Ryle's Tavern?
No, I didn't. But you are getting to a picture I just sent you, right?
I saw that. Well, no, I'm not going to go that direction. I want to talk about Putin first, if I can. But time permitting, I'd love the picture. Made me laugh very hard.
I'm beginning to think Putin may have lost his moral compass.
Do you think, really? I was going to suggest the same thing, and I'm going to quote from your piece, which I love, that never strike a king, Ralph Waldo Emerson, unless you are sure that you shall kill him. Good advice, huh?
Absolutely. Machiavelli said the same thing. He said, never give your enemy a blow from which he can recover. And that's exactly what Prigozhin and the Wagner Group did. I think when they marched on
Moscow,
and Putin disappeared, by the way. He didn't stay in Moscow to rally the troops. He disappeared, much like Stalin did when Hitler invaded. But I think, and then Prigozhin pulled up short. Now, why would you march and then pull up short? And I think the only reason for that, we still don't know for sure, would be that he had been promised support from a lot of people who at the last minute decided to reverse their support and pull out. You can't take over the capital city with 30,000 troops or something. You need a lot of people. You need a lot of the generals and so forth in charge of military units there to say, we're coming over to your side. And when he didn't have them, he was just walking into a buzzsaw, and so he called it off.
Why do you suppose he was continuing to go between Moscow and St. Petersburg? He had been to Belarus, right? He had kind of got refuge there. Suppose he was in Africa. That may or may not be true. I mean, over the last couple of weeks or 10 days or what have you. But why would you fly from Moscow to St. Petersburg? It's not so much that this happened. It was a surprise that it took so long for it to happen.
That's exactly right. I think the short answer is bad judgment. In other words, Putin and he got together briefly and had a kind of can't we all be friends, what I'd call a Rodney King moment. But in fact, you can't trust Putin, and Putin knew that his regime was vulnerable. He was personally vulnerable. If he's out of power, he could be out of life. And there's a reason that the people he's put in charge of his military are not the kind of people who could ever stage an uprising against him. They're from marginal groups. They've never led the military. They're not generals who've actually operated. And so you can see it in the army that's fighting in Ukraine. That army was put together really to distribute graft to people that Putin wanted to allow to get rich off of his regime. But when they called on them to actually fight, they were unprepared.
What happens to the rest of those troops from the Wagner Group?
I think that if you're a low-level troop, you just sort of fade back into the background. If you're an officer or a high-level person, I would try to get out of wherever I was and not be found, because I think you're incredibly vulnerable. The United States is not going to want to, or NATO countries are not going to want to give them asylum because they've committed so many war crimes. You might give one or two asylum in order to get information that you didn't otherwise have about Russian military secrets. But basically, those people are all in real trouble.
Why such a visible assassination as opposed to just falls down the steps or topples out of a window, a suicide, or gets hit with an umbrella while crossing a bridge in London? Why so visible? Is it a message?
Yes, exactly. Remember that scene? Is it in the where Al Capone takes a baseball bat?
Yeah, that's De Niro in The Untouchables.
Right. And why do you do that at that scene rather than quietly kill the guy the next day out of the room? Well, you're sending a message to everybody else at the table, and that's exactly what was happening here.
Yeah, well, message received.
I'm not messing with him.
How much more time does it give him?
Putin?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to say. The reason it's hard to say is if you want an analogy to how regimes break, they don't break like a willow tree that's pushed further and further over, and then finally the trunk breaks. They break like pressure on a glass tabletop. There's more and more pressure, and then all of a sudden it disintegrates. breaks through and the cracks appear a second or so before the true breakthrough. I think that the critical issue for Putin is that he cannot lose Crimea. Crimea is really important in the way that the Russians think of themselves, but by the same token, the Ukrainians can't give it up because it allows, if the Russians hold it, it allows them to cut off any naval transportation.
Right. That's their warm water port.
Exactly, and the Ukrainians need it in order. They're a major grain producer, and they need that, and they also need to be able to reconstruct their country.
Yeah, but we've been fighting over that peninsula. The British and the Turks and Russia were all fighting the Crimean War in 1840. Same real estate. Here we go again.
1853 to 1856, and that was when Florence Nightingale invented modern nursing. But
the cashmere sweater was invented.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yes,
I didn't realize that.
Right.
It was also where the charge of the Light
Brigade Tennyson
occurred, and one of the old English generals was so out of it, not unlike some of our current leadership, that he kept referring to the enemy as the French.
Yeah. Well,
they were actually on his side.
Yeah, it'll happen. It happens. Charles, thank you so much. Have a terrific weekend. And I love reading you, and you can find all of Charles's works at charleslipson.com, including, if you follow him on Facebook, he also gets into some great blues music as well. So I go Facebook for the music, charleslipson.com for the articles on politics and world events. And have a great weekend, Charles. Thanks for popping on.
I really appreciate it, John. I love talking both politics and music with you, my friend.
And cardigan sweaters.
Absolutely.
Google it.
But last week you couldn't have convinced me about a cardigan sweater. It was the hottest week I can remember.
There were 3. I can't remember the other 2, but there were 3 new styles of outerwear that came out of the Crimean War. One was cardigan. Raglan. That's it. He was the other guy. Yes.
Yeah, raglan sleeves, and I don't know what the other one was. We're like, was it Rick Perry, who had 3 ideas in the debate? And, he could only
and the third one is I can't remember. I can't remember.
Good to talk to you, my friend.
Take care. Charles Lipson here on WLS.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
I like to look forward to the weekend and decide whether or not I'd like to get out to see a movie. You know, post-pandemic, starting to see movies in the theater again. I distinctly remember 1973, Yom Kippur War between Israel and her neighbors. I watched this as Nixon and Kissinger were trying to decide how much aid to send to Israel. It was touch and go for a while, but they had an extraordinary prime minister, Golda Meir.
When I was a child in Ukraine, they would beat Jews to death in the street for fun. I am not that little girl hiding in the cellar.
She also had a history just up the road from us in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Jason Nathanson, ABC News Entertainment correspondent, joining us now on the Magic Box from Los Angeles. I'm really interested in seeing this movie. Is it worth seeing?
Yeah, Golda stars Helen Mirren as Golda Meir, who you just heard there, and you mentioned her Milwaukee connection. That's where she grew up and did a lot of her schooling after moving from Ukraine to the United States and then eventually to Israel, where she became prime minister and served during this war in 1973, which lasted just over 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks. And was incredibly stressful, and that's what this focuses on. It's not a biopic of Golda Meir. It is specifically focused on this time, the Yom Kippur War, and the stress that she was, fighting Egypt and the other neighbors, fighting with her own generals, and as you mentioned, fighting with Kissinger to try to get aid to Israel. And Helen Mirren's performance is fantastic, as you would imagine, from her spending 3.5 hours in makeup and prosthetics every day to get the look just right, which is pretty incredible. And she pulls it off voice and look-wise. The movie overall, a little bit uneven, but not as good as her performance. Her performance is really what stands out, but the story I felt was very interesting.
Why was it controversial with the choice of Helen Mirren?
It was controversial because there's been this thing over the past few years. It's really become more noticeable and more vocal as there's representation in Hollywood and people playing different roles. People have pointed out that Jewish actors don't often play Jewish people of prominence. Whether you're looking at in the upcoming movie Leonard Bernstein, Maestro by Bradley Cooper about Leonard Bernstein. Bradley Cooper is playing the lead role, not Jewish there. There was the movie a couple years ago about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not played by a Jewish person. Even fictional characters like the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, where Judaism is core to that character. Rachel Brosnahan, who played her, not Jewish. And so a lot of people have said, well, in this age of representation, we should be looking for more Jewish actors to play these Jewish characters. And so there was some who spoke out about this choice, who felt that maybe it wasn't the right choice. And I talked to the director of the film, who said that that wasn't even a thought from the beginning, because it was Golda Meir's grandson who picked Helen Mirren to play this role. So you're not going to argue with the grandson of the person who is playing. And the director himself, Guy Nativ, is Israeli and is Jewish. And he told me, look, if it's good enough for me, if I'm okay with this and I'm the one telling the story, then it should be good enough for everybody.
Well, they had the same controversy kind of regarding Maestro and the makeup, right? And it was a family who said, we're okay with it.
Yes, correct. So that was with the Leonard Bernstein movie, and the look came out. We saw the first trailer a couple weeks ago, and Bradley Cooper had a very large, prominent nose. And in that case, it was more of a claim of Jew face, right? Instead of blackface, Jew face, and in making him look comically Jewish. But again, his family, Bernstein's family, spoke out and said that, yes, their father did have a big nose and that they were fine with Bradley Cooper's portrayal and were part of the process from the beginning.
It's a minefield now, isn't it, as far as casting?
It is, but I think these are interesting conversations to be had. And I think, it depends on the people who are involved and how sensitive they are to these things. And are they really thinking about these things? In these two specific cases, yes, we do know that there was a thought and the families were thinking about it. And that was something that it was done in consultation with them. That hasn't been the case in the past. So
Sure.
I think this is a lot of conversation about trying to correct past wrongs and make sure we don't end up with some of the really serious, issues that we had. Who was it? It was Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? It was Mickey Rooney.
Audrey Hepburn, right?
Right. But it was Mickey Rooney who famously played a very stereotypical Asian character in that film that created a lot of issues for a lot of people. A lot of people are making sure we don't go back to something like that.
Well, like even I try to watch some movies that came out years ago that I thought they were hilarious, and now there's some really cringeworthy moments and even lots of classic movies.
100%. And, and we look back on those with different eyes. Yeah. And again, those at the time seemed right because nobody questioned it. Yeah. Right. So now.
Well, also, it wasn't amplified. People were questioning that back then, too, but it wasn't amplified. Now, a very small wheel can be very, very squeaky.
Yeah. Well, and you have an opportunity to voice things in a way that you didn't before, and I don't think that's necessarily such a bad thing.
I don't.
You have the groups that are in the minority making sure that their images and their likenesses and their stories are being told properly and protected. Sometimes it goes overboard the other way, but again, yeah. In the past it's gone overboard the other way. So they're trying to make sure the pendulum is swinging properly.
Yeah. Well, hey, societal evolution. Anything new on the strike?
Nothing new on the strike. We had, there were talks earlier this week with the big guns from the big studios, Bob Iger, chairman of my company, Disney, Ted Sarandos from Netflix, Donna Langley from Universal, and others, David Zaslav from Warner Brothers, all went to the table on Tuesday to have a meeting. And after that meeting, the MPTP put out their full proposal that they had put out on August 11th and said, here's what we're offering, in an attempt to say, hey, to the public, hey, look, this deal is good. This is what we're offering. And then yesterday, the Writers Guild shot back and said, that they were basically trying to be. They felt that they were being bullied in that meeting. They were being lectured to by the studio heads. It wasn't like okay, let's figure out how we can do this. From their perspective, it was more of a lecture, like a little kid being spoken to. So that's not great. But again, they are talking, and these are negotiations, so you would expect this kind of rhetoric. So hopefully, the cooler heads will prevail eventually.
Jason Nathanson, ABC News entertainment correspondent out in Los Angeles, thank you for your time. Have a terrific weekend.
John Howell, Essential Cuts. Check back every weekday for another episode of John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.